Our first speaker is well known. He grew up on a corn and soybean farm in southwest Iowa, Shenandoah to be exact. He has worked to promote renewable fuels since the year 2000, the last 17 plus years as our executive director of Iowa Renewable Fuels. And I've even heard that in the last few years, he's rejoined his family farming operation over in Shenandoah. So, heads up this fall, if anybody sees him hauling corn to an ethanol plant with the RFA Tahoe, please call a board member. Please join me in welcoming Monty Shaw.
You took my speech.
I did.
It's up here. All right. Well, thank you, Al. Thanks for that introduction. And thank you for the fact that you always are willing to give your time and your energy to support IRFA and the renewable fuels industry. I want to start by echoing what Al said about the foresight of the founding members of the IRFA who created this organization 20 years ago. You know, it was kind of fun and gratifying to take a little bit of time last year to think back over the first 2 decades and all that we'd accomplished. It was quite a track record. But I can tell you that you can rest assured that we did not rest on our laurels. In fact, in my somewhat biased opinion, I think 2022 was probably the best year ever for IRFA. So as we look at those accomplishments as an organization, we had our first 2 renewable natural gas producer members join, Verbio and Gevo. So that was a milestone. Thanks to the hard work of Lisa Koffel, we had record associate memberships as well. We also had, last year was the first year that we held this event at this beautiful facility, and we had record sponsorships. We also, at our annual IRFA Members Day, had a record-breaking pack auction. And we had a record participation from congressional and administration staff in our biofuels tour that we hold every year. So it was quite a good year for the association. As we look at our state policy activities, thanks to Governor Reynolds and our legislative champions, Iowa was able to enact the first of its kind E15 access standard. Governor Reynolds also signed into law the first ever state incentive for retailers to blend B30. We're going through the B20 levels and up to higher levels. IRFA, to help our retailer partners transition to these higher blends, also asked for and received $10 million from the legislature for the state renewable fuels infrastructure grant program. That is double whatever the money we've gotten before. And finally, so that was a great on the state level. So I would say when you see Nathan Hohenstein out at our booth, be sure to tell him a good job. Now, on the federal level, we work with lots of other state groups, lots of other national groups. We're just one of the groups, but we do try to help move the needle on the federal policy. We got the first ever in 2022, first ever direct funding for the Higher Blends Infrastructure Program known as HBIP, $500 million. That's going to really help move the needle for retailers to be able to offer higher blends of ethanol and biodiesel. We also had game-changing tax credits passed in the Inflation Reduction Act for different biofuels. And we're going to dig into those policies both on the state and the federal level later on after lunch in our policy panel. So next, I want to talk about something that kind of straddles the state and the federal policies. In 2022, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds led a bipartisan coalition of Midwest states to exercise their powers under the Clean Air Act to equalize the regulations for E10 and E15. Now, without getting into all the technical weeds, basically what this means is in those states, we should be able to offer E15 year-round. And so it might even trigger a national fix as well. So if you look at those accomplishments from just 1 year alone, our 20th anniversary was a pretty darn good year for IRFA and one that we won't soon forget. So thank you for your trust, your support, and your hard work to make that happen. As I thought back on it, I thought, why do we do this? Well, it's quite simple. Renewable fuels have changed the economic trajectory of the state of Iowa. According to an economic study that IRFA is releasing today, Iowa's ethanol and biodiesel producers spent over $15 billion on inputs in the year 2022. As that turns over in the Iowa economy, the impact is multiplied. All told, as you can see up here, we boosted Iowa's GDP by over $7 billion. We added over $3.5 billion to Iowa household income. A lot of that is farm family income. and we support throughout the entire Iowa economy over 57,000 jobs. I believe that that is an impact that is worth fighting to maintain and to expand. So as I survey the IRFA members, I can tell you today that the state of the Iowa renewable fuels industry is energized, but perhaps a little bit angry. Producers are energized because the world is demanding clean, affordable, renewable energy, and we can deliver. We're energized because the productivity of agriculture is unceasing. We're energized because new technologies are opening up huge new markets for biodiesel and ethanol and renewable natural gas. We're energized because new incentives are propelling radical improvements in renewable fuels production. So you might ask, why a little bit angry? Well, I'm kind of blunt. To put it simply, we are sick and tired of elected officials and interest groups trying to protect their cherry-picked forms of energy, whether that be supporters of fossil fuels over here or electric vehicles over here. Now, a minute ago, so let me talk about two quick examples. A minute ago, I talked about the block of Midwest governors that are using their authority that Congress gave them under the Clean Air Act to open the door for year-round E15 blending in their states. Under that law, EPA shall, it's very clear, it's not might, it's not could, shall approve those and put those regulations in place in 90 days. That is the law. The governors made their request last April. So under that deadline, this should have been finalized in plenty of time to be in place so that we can sell E15, retailers in those states can sell E15 this coming summer, and consumers can continue to have the option to buy it. EPA should have acted in 90 days, and they drafted a rule. Then the White House stepped in, and everything stopped. Dramatic pause. Be patient, we were told. Gasoline prices were a touchy election issue, we were told. Keep your powder dry, don't play politics, we were told. It'll get done. So we waited. Meanwhile, one senior EPA official last August assured us, quote, "We are taking steps to promulgate a rule as quickly as possible. Our intent remains to finalize this action before the 2023 summer driving season." Okay? Another high-ranking EPA official in September pledged, "We are taking steps to promulgate a rule, and as quickly as possible, we intend to finalize this action in time for the 2023 summer driving season." All right. Well, finally, in December, a draft rule did go from EPA to the White House Office of Management and Budget, OMB. Now, predictably, the oil industry weighed in. Some of the same groups that have opposed and stymied a federal legislative fix to E15 weighed in with the OMB and told them to hold off, delay, don't follow the law. Now, unpredictably, the OMB, instead of releasing the EPA's rule to move forward, sent it back to EPA for revisions. This is nothing more than a ruse to delay action in order to justify the oil refiners' request that the Midwest E15 fix be delayed until after 2023. It might sound weird to some of you to hear this from me, but EPA is not the problem on this E15 fix. They had the rule ready to go on time. Someone in the White House put the brakes on. And this is going to cause irreparable harm to thousands of retailers and millions of consumers. To put it bluntly, we were told to be patient, keep quiet, and everything would be fine for this summer, and the White House broke its promise. So yes, we're a little bit angry. The governors did everything right, and it's unconscionable for me to think that when the White House breaks the law, it's the Midwest motorists who have to pay the price at the pump. We must raise our voices and demand that the Midwest E15 fix be put in place for this summer. It is not too late for President Biden to step in, rein in his OMB, and get this rule back on track. And I ask you guys to join with me to do that. Now, as I turn to the second example of what brings out a little bit of that angry, I think back to what Al mentioned. Yes, I'm a farmer again. Well, kind of. My family last farmed our own ground about 34 years ago. Since then, we crop shared. But in 2002, after my father retired from his intervening career and apparently ran out of other useful things to do, he decided at age 78 to start farming again. Why not? Now, to be honest, my brother and father do most of the work. Basically, they let me drive the grain cart. Now, you can say what you want, but this thing here is a lot bigger than the John Deere 4020 with 2 Parker gravity flow wagons that I was driving 34 years ago, I'll tell you that. And it was great to get my son down there to help as well. 3 generations brought in the harvest. And in the end, isn't that why we're here? To utilize the land the good Lord gave us, to do it in a productive and sustainable and profitable way, and to try to leave the place just a little bit better than we found it for the next generation? Well, I think the single biggest force to make things better for Iowa ag over the last 30 years was the explosive growth of renewable fuels during the first decade of this century. I remember growing up and taking corn to the local elevator and getting 30 cents a bushel under the Chicago price. Today, that same ethanol plant in Shenandoah routinely I shouldn't say the same ethanol plant. Today, an ethanol plant in Shenandoah pays routinely 30 to 40 cents a bushel over that Chicago price. The change in Iowa farm income did not happen by accident, and we should not assume it won't go away if ethanol production does. Now, I understand the deep feelings that farmers have for their land. I share it. I appreciate that emotions arise when we talk about carbon capture and sequestration, or CCS. The farm I grew up on now has a pipeline going under it and a runway going over it. I know about eminent domain. But I also know that agriculture has always been successful by staying aligned with its customer needs. Today's ethanol plants are no different. The largest domestic and export markets around the world are demanding low-carbon ethanol. And as I mentioned earlier, the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits last year were an absolute game changer. They equate to up to 60 cents a gallon for ethanol if you have the CCS technology. I honestly don't think it's hyperbole to say that capturing and sequestering carbon is going to be life or death for many ethanol plants over the next 5 years. Now, let me be clear. I am not here to ask any of you to support low-carbon policies. I am not here to ask any of you to support low-carbon tax incentives. I am asking you to honestly consider the real-world impact they are having on Iowa's ethanol plants. If we want to maintain or grow ethanol production, it is going to require CCS. So I have a few messages today. If you are a farmer and you honestly accept that the local price for corn, your local price for corn, can very easily go back to that negative basis of the 1990s, and you still oppose CCS, fine, that is your right. But if you breezily assume that you can oppose CCS and there will be no economic price to pay, then I politely suggest that you think again. If you are an Iowa legislature and you honestly believe that the current laws don't provide enough landowner protections, fine, that is your right. But if you support legislation that singles out CO2 pipelines or liquid fuel pipelines, then I would, instead of applying those standards that you want to all issues of eminent domain, then I would politely suggest that you're not really interested in property rights. There is no other way for Iowa ethanol producers to interpret such legislation, whether this was the intention or not, than as a direct attack on us to the benefit of those that want to eliminate liquid fuels. It is no wonder that the anti-ag, anti-ethanol, anti-internal combustion engine Sierra Club is the first group that registers in support of those bills. Think about this. CCS is literally the best tool we have to keep liquid fuels competitive in the competition with electric vehicles. Now, if you're an activist who shouts, no eminent domain for private companies, and you live off the natural gas and electric grid, fine, good for you. But if you heat your home with natural gas or you light your rooms with electricity, then I politely suggest that your words and deeds do not align. Those electric and gas providers are all private companies. How do you think they built those networks, those distribution networks? Now finally, if you consider yourself an environmentalist and think we need to take drastic measures to address catastrophic climate change, fine, take your stand. But if you call CCS greenwashing, then I politely suggest that you are not serious about science. Taking carbon that is already in the atmosphere and putting it back down underground should be considered an incredible achievement from your point of view. And it is also a central tenet of every single country's plan to meet 2050 climate goals. I feel better. Whew. I've been wanting to get that off my chest for a long time. So in closing, I just want to say that I firmly believe the energy in this room today is going to overcome that little bit of anger. I am as optimistic as ever that the role renewable fuels can play to boost our economy, create U.S. jobs, enhance energy security, and clean up our environment is unparalleled. Now, yes, there's going to be some annoying bumps along the way. There always are. But we've never hit a roadblock that we haven't overcome. So join me today in putting that little bit of anger behind us as we roll up our sleeves and get to work. energized by the near limitless possibilities for renewable fuels and renewable products as we look out to the horizon. Thank you very much.